Yeah. In fact, oh no, he's chill. I'll leave him be. If he gets up, I'll show him to the camera. But yeah.
Did you get a dog during the lockdown time, or
No,
you had?
we've had him a few years.
Mm,
We've had
okay.
him a few years. He's a little Jack Russell, aren't you, Moobeen?
Ah,
Yes. Lots of energy. Very
yeah.
barky. But he is great.
Cool. Lockdown sounds like the best time to actually get a dog, because you stop all the traveling and you can train and focus like entirely. And I've seen so many of my friends who took a dog during this time, and it's a shame I can't, because well, we're renting out and it's not possible for this
Yeah.
apartment.
When we first got him, we were in a flat where we weren't allowed to have pets, and we did it anyway. And yeah, now we're living in a place where it's fine, and we're moving to
Mm-hmm.
a place we've bought. So obviously, I think you can come with. Maybe the new landlords won't like pets. We also have a lockdown baby, so she's just turned 7 months old. So that
Oh,
happened. It's both good and bad. Good because, as you said, no travel. You can spend lots of time, which otherwise you would
yeah.
be like in an office. Bad because, one thing you get to basically exploit having a new kid is that loads of people want to come around and see the kid, and you can save chores for them to do.
Mm-hmm.
And we've lost that. So yeah, it's a lot. But yeah, the four of us, Doggo included, are doing okay.
Yeah, I see. That's a lot going on your side.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
excited. The move is going to be a lot, but I am excited.
oh, that's great. So you're not like by any chance coming back to the office when the lockdown will be over? I don't know if it will be over anytime soon,
Potentially,
but yeah.
potentially, not 5 days a week. It makes no sense. I've invested too much time, energy, and money into creating a really strong work from home setup. Like, I'm not struggling with my setup. Like, I have invested in it. So if anything, times I'm going into the office will probably make me less productive. But the place we're moving is like 150 miles away from London, yet it's only
Mhm.
1 hour 13 to get to King's Cross on
I
the train.
see.
So
I
it's,
see.
yeah, it was picked for that reason.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Actually, my friends, like really good friends, they made just the same thing. They live in London for I don't know how many years, and they also moved outside, like from the one of the central areas, like out 41
I mean,
hour.
we
Yeah.
spend a lot on rent. I mean, we get good value for what we spend, but we spend a lot on rent, and we don't get to get use of the city, and we haven't really missed it. And we have a kid, and so we can literally almost half our monthly outgoing from our rent to our mortgage, pay less, and own a
Hmm.
place, and it will be cleaner air and yeah, bigger
Yeah,
space. It is a
totally makes
no-brainer for
sense.
us.
Yeah, makes sense. It looks
Right,
like
we are live on YouTube, Twitch, and
Excellent.
Facebook. I'm launching
okay.
on Twitter, and we're good to go. Then we will say hi to all the people already watching us. But keep a casual discussion, please.
Oh yes, we're just talking about moving out of big cities.
Yeah, it actually totally makes sense with all the remote working. And I think there is like lots of people who won't be even considering coming back. The same as actually people who used to travel to the conferences. I see that lots of them, especially like speakers, the ones who are super busy, I don't know, working somewhere, and they just don't want to travel. They would rather prefer to speak, online. Um,
I think hybrid of it. I don't know quite how it will manifest, or if people will kind of land on a standard. But I'm really excited to see after, coronavirus is something we don't have to think about as much. What events will actually look like. I imagine it will probably be smaller in-person audiences plus an online audience, and then I've already started to think about ways in which you could bridge those two and bring them together. It'll be interesting to see what they end up looking like.
Yeah. Well, the biggest concern for hybrid everything, for hybrid events, hybrid, I don't know, office attending or something like that, the biggest concern is that the information that is being spread out could be spread out not evenly, right? So this is the main challenge I see. I don't know if you see any other ones, but this is like the biggest challenge for me.
Networking is the thing I'm mainly thinking about. So I've had an idea on how this might work. This is purely speculative. It's not based on this is a hunch, and it's something that I would like to try, see if it will work, and then iterate upon or ditch if it doesn't work. But my idea is, you know how you kind of get these, I think, slightly awkward one-to-one like speed networking sessions at some event platforms have these.
Yeah.
I think it'd be really cool to kind of set up a couple of phone booths, or where you get your passport photos taken, those kind of booths. And they are basically those one-to-one like speed networking, but it bridges the gap between your in-person attendees and your remote attendees and allow them to have some form of interaction and kind of tether them in this single experience for short periods and then let people cycle out of those.
Aha, I see. Okay, so for the person who is physically attending the event, they can actually get into that booth and basically pick up the phone and talk to somebody.
Yeah,
Would
or
that
have
be
like a
with,
video call.
yeah. So it would be with video or without.
I mean, the idea is there. It could be implemented in any number of ways. I would probably vote having just a quick video call.
Mm.
And it's time, like it stops after 5 minutes and then it randomizes. And the idea is you leave as an in-person person if there's someone else who wants to go, and the person who was virtual swaps out. Perhaps the virtual attendees can still be doing this, and there's just like a coin toss as to whether it's an in-person person or a online person. But I'm not really a big fan of the one-to-one networkings online, but maybe that's just because of screen fatigue generally. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I was just about to say that yesterday I was, listening to one of the talks on Clubhouse, and people were saying there that whenever you have like a video call, you need to prepare to it. Like you need to have your questions listed. I don't know, you need to prepare some, like your clothes and everything, right, to look nice. But whenever you have just an audio hangout or audio call, you don't need to prepare. You basically can, I don't know, reach out to person and offer right away to have that call. And if the person has time, then he or she doesn't need to prepare. So I was thinking that maybe a better idea would be to have that audio. And yeah. So
I see the merits. I see the merits in both. I think there's a lot that can be said for visual cues in conversations, seeing if people are actually engaging with what you're saying, if they're confused, and you can provide more context. You don't get that audio only. Meanwhile, audio only increases your probably your take up, your adoption of a tool like this. But yeah, I've just started thinking about like, how do you bridge the gap between a remote audience and a physical audience to give them a comparable experience? And networking is one of the areas I think that just is really tough to make comparable.
yeah. Yes, and pretty much all the online events, well, if talking about pure online, usually they would have this just a roulette, and it doesn't like 100% time work perfectly. Like the best things I think work, like whenever you are joining some session, and after that you would join a certain chat with a speaker, let's say, and then people will interact with each other and eventually will meet each other. So this is like, to my perspective, this works the best. But I don't know, maybe there is something that I'm not aware yet of.
I just don't see that working in an in-person setting, and then even less so when you have a split between the two. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about at the moment for the 6, 9, 12, 18 months away, when we will be thinking probably about hybrid events.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I would love to jump onto your discussion, because hybrid events is what I enjoy and what I'm preparing, what I have been preparing, like lots of tech and processes for. And we should totally get back to this topic, especially if you people watching us, like I know there are many channels, you can comment everywhere or join us after like 40-ish minutes in a people channels in our Discord. Probably there is a link how to get there, and we will talk about that and everything else we will have talked in 40 minutes. There we go. So let me do a creepy intro, and the previous intro wasn't creepy enough, so I need to make a creepy one.
go
And
ahead. There is nobody to stop you today from the intro.
no. Kevin, usually it's usually it's three of us. It's Karina, who you've met. It's myself and my Beard. We function normally together, and there is a third person who pretty much makes this all fun because she bullies everybody because she's young and she thinks that she knows everything, and she doesn't like everybody, so that's why we call her.
And she doesn't like questions about money. So whenever we start, this topic, she would stop us right immediately. But today she's absent, so we're free to talk about
the
money.
Money.
Yeah.
We'll talk about the money. We are recording. We are live on 5 channels. And hello and welcome.
Hello.
We will talk today about how Discord can be used to run a digital conference. Then we will pivot into a bit of the tech, and then we will pivot a bit of can we also stretch this into the hybrid events. Hopefully in 6 months, the hybrid events, that's what we're going to be talking about. Not virtual, but hybrid. Maybe, probably. Do you think so? Right. We have a guest, an expert, Kevin Lewis, with You Got This conference. You work at... you can talk a bit about yourself. Why am I talking about yourself?
Sure. I was wondering where we were going with that. Yes, hello, my name's Kevin Lewis. I am a developer advocate at a company called Vonage, who has a communication API platform for developers. So that's like voice, video, messaging stuff. And aside from that, I run a community conference series called You Got This, which is all about core skills. Sometimes they are called soft skills or leadership skills. But it's a conference series aimed at developers, but really these kind of skills are applicable to everyone. So at these events, we bring together technical people, and we don't have any technical talks. We have talks about kind of having a happier, healthier work life. And all the talks are recorded and made available for free online so people can get the most use out of them after the event. Or events.
And you also have a Discord community
Yes.
that you use for these conferences.
Yeah.
And
so, sorry, you go ahead.
so this Discord community, you have built this for, or who have built this, or like how does it work? And what does this community do between the conferences?
That last one is actually going to be a story of failure and experimentation. So we can come on to that in a moment. But so to provide some context, You Got This started as an annual fixture in January. It was meant to be like the wholesome first event of the conference year. People have just come off of their months off, and we can have this nice time together. That happened a few times. Then coronavirus happened. In that same rough window, it went from being an event run by an events agency that I ran previously to just a hobby project when I joined Vonage. And with that, it became a series of community events. So we now have an event that I run, it was the UK event and went online. There's adulting.dev in New York, HumansConf in Frankfurt, Germany, and IT Matters in Poland. And so I coordinate them, but they each have their own organizing teams. So coronavirus happened. A couple of the organizers, me and Shai, who runs the New York event, adulting.dev, decided we wanted to run an online conference. We've run lots of events between us. So, there was a bit of learning around the online format, but fundamentally it's the same, it's the same core principles. And when we went to run it, we were considering which platforms we were going to run the event on. We basically ended up doing a 2-platform approach, which has its pros and cons. The actual stream itself went out to YouTube, and all of the community discussion happened in Discord. We chose YouTube because you could turn off chat, and then we could just use a single platform for the chat. And and inside the Discord, we had all of our moderation set up in a way that is less robust if we were to use a built-in chat on another platform. And the idea is we capture this community, and some of them will continue, hopefully, to discuss these themes of the conference between events.
You mentioned that. Yeah, sorry.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just about to ask, since you've been mentioning like a platform for developers, I was wondering how's that different from any other platform? Is there some special functionality that you built for developers or something like that? Or it's pretty much the same thing?
So that event in June, it was a completely vanilla setup. We used YouTube for the video with chat turned off, and we used Discord for the conversations. Our setup basically was our conference series has 7 themes.
Mhm.
Basically, every talk can find itself in one or more of these themes. So we had one channel per theme, with the idea being that after the talk, there's a little Q&A where people can post questions in Discord. We feed them to the host, who feeds them to the speaker, and then we encourage continued conversation in the topic relevant channel. A couple of core channels, announcements, general intros, stuff like that, and then sponsor channels. So that's the kind of setup of our Discord. And so that we ran that in June, and that was fine. Like, we used StreamYard for the video that went out to YouTube. For those who don't know, StreamYard is like an online broadcasting studio where you can have your speakers and hosts join via a web link and do it all in their browser. With the added benefit of, if your machine completely craps out and dies halfway through, which mine did in January's conference, the whole thing, it just continues. It's not dependent on a single machine. It's just you can't change anything until you get back. Unfortunately, I got back in before it was an issue. So we did that, and then we were thinking about how we could engage this community more meaningfully, and we set up a book club. The idea behind the book club was once a week, then extended to once a month or reduced to once a month, we will publish a piece of content that is third party, not ours. We will consume it. Some of it's written, some of it's video, audio, and then we set aside some time to talk about it. And then the following day, we release the next month. For the first couple of months, that was okay. There was a small audience, and then it just completely tapered off and didn't come back.
Why do you think it happened?
I think so. Let me preface this with, our Discord during the conference was very, very active throughout the whole day. And I think part of the reason for that is, unlike some specialist conferences, like technical conferences, where a single audience member might only be interested in a couple of pieces of content, the themes we talk about generally are applicable to most, if not all, of the audience all the time. So we do good at retention throughout the event. After the event, though, ultimately it is a Discord that was born out of an event. Initially, my thoughts were there was a tiny lag between the event ending and the book club starting, and that might have been the big drop where we lost people. But the same thing happened in January. I'll talk about January in a moment, because I built a events platform for the consuming the video side, but we still use Discord as our community space. And the same thing happened after the event. It kind of tapered off. We maybe once a month, couple of times a month, there's a at everyone announcement, and they get okay engagement, but there just isn't that much to chat about. And so I'm incredibly happy with this idea that this Discord exists, works really well for the event, kind of disappears between the events, but we do retain the community members. Clearly, they see announcements, and then they come back for the next event, and they're already in there. I wanted to make it more of a regular, ongoing community, a space to talk about these slightly more taboo topics, potentially things we don't really have a chance to speak about more often. And that didn't happen. That's also okay. Plus, I think people are bored of community, of like online, being in front of a screen, having to constantly field so many platforms, so many Discord servers, so many Slack workspaces. I'm more than happy for my one to take a back seat until we actually run an event.
Yeah, but on the other side, Slack is something that is more related to to the business, to work, and then Discord is something for mostly, I don't know, entertainment, if I may say so. But yeah, I was actually more curious in something that you mentioned previously, like about the gap that you had between the conference and then starting this community. I don't know how you call that, like a book club, like meetups, micro conferences, hangouts, or something like that. Do you think that gap could have been like a problem, or maybe not?
Potentially, but we saw, even though we didn't have anything to promote immediately after, we saw exactly the same drop off the next time. Maybe we could have captured people immediately, like at the end of the conference, but my hunch says people can be very optimistic about what they have bandwidth to take part in. And I think we would have suffered the same fate even if we had announced it immediately. The reason for that gap mostly was we wanted to draw a line under the conference. There's work that has to be done. We have to edit and release the videos, the transcripts, get all of that up. And then the book club came with those. So it's like, great, draw a line under the here's all the content. Now let's talk about the book club. We could have done that in parallel, but decided not to. Not for any sound reason, we just didn't.
What I found super fun and super interesting that you, as a conference, you tried to make a conference be not like a short few days concentrated event, but like to continue with small micro events. And it didn't work out. But the question I wanted to ask is, do you think you would be able to get sponsorships for these micro things as well? Since for the big event, I see how you made it in Discord, and probably it would be cool to talk about that as well. Of do sponsored channels work better than sponsored booths in Hopin, for example? But yeah, I mean, let's talk about the money. I like talking about the money.
Let's talk about money. So I'm going to give a TLDR on money for You Got This generally, and then you can ask me any pointed questions. I think that might be the best way to do this. Firstly, You Got This, as it became my hobby project, needs to make absolutely zero profit because I have a job. Like it just needs to pay for itself. The costs involved with the conference are the small ad hoc bits of software. We use Mux to do our video stream this time. I'll talk about our platform that I built in a moment. There's small tech costs around that, but they're really negligible, like really, really small. The actual main costs are we pay speakers, because I think, if you have the ability to do that, that is wonderful. I think that's very, very important. So we pay speakers, we pay people to do the blind CFP review. That isn't a voluntary thing. We pay people to do that. We pay to have a live captioner. And that ended up being like half the cost of the whole event. It's quite expensive to have someone sit there and really like be able to focus the whole time and do their very skilled work. Don't take that to mean that is a bad investment. I think it's excellent and we'll continue to do it. But that was like half the cost of the event. Then we did a couple of Twitter giveaways that had like costs of printing stickers, cost of shipping, but again, fairly small in comparison. The whole event cost us about, I can't quite remember. It was like sub 10 grand. It was sub 10 grand in total.
And it's a lot of people and a lot of sponsors. So that's a superb result, magnificent result. I cannot even pick a right word to express my excitement.
So I have one other thing that's worth noting about You Got This is I very much feel like there are two great things about this conference for people who attend. One of them is the networking, because finally we're in a space where we can pull down the barriers around talking about some of these more taboo topics. To take an example of a talk from the last in-person conference in January 2020, wow, it feels so long ago now, was like, it's not your job to love your job, by Keziah Lewis. It was a very, very good talk, but about the dangers of unconditional job love and the way that employers, knowingly or unknowingly, get you to buy into their vision in a way that compromises your own fight or flight response, right? And then you end up being exploited, whether or not it's intentional. You would never talk about that at a tech conference. That's quite potentially a dangerous thing to talk about but in these spaces we can absolutely discuss that. Another talk, real talk about when to walk away from your job, when to decide this is not what I want anymore, create a plan and execute the plan to leave. You wouldn't talk about that at tech conference, but you can in this space. So the first part is this networking, where the kind of the norms are set that allow you to talk about these topics. And then the other is the content itself, very, very valuable. While networking does still happen at the online events using Discord, and I do think it's very healthy and positive and has a high volume of discussion in a good way, I very much am treating that as a an extra bonus, because I don't think online networking works nearly as well as in person. So I've been focusing the online events much, much more on generating high value content and then making it available for free online. And to
And
that
by
end,
networking, are you saying about, I know people jump on the audio chat with sponsors or with themselves, or do they just text
we
in the
chose
channel?
just text because voice and audio is just hard to moderate. And we were a small team. I'm the constant between all the events, but this team had like 4 people on it, so it was a small team.
And moderation, are you sure you would totally need the moderation? Why code of conduct is not good enough?
So we do have a code of conduct, and we have a pretty strong reporting procedure. It's an easy read code of conduct that makes it very clear what is and isn't expected. However, no, code of conduct isn't enough. I think you also need to create spaces that limit the ability for people to break the code of conduct. Of course, people break it, you have an instant response procedure, which we do, and you handle it, but you shouldn't allow people to be the victim of a code of conduct like violation. So that's my take. However, you're right. Like, we had this conversation as a team. We could have left open a few voice channels and said, like, this is where to come if there's a problem. But actually, we decided that also, because the most of the day was content, because we were focusing more on content than networking, it was pretty packed. There was 1 15-minute break, 2 half-hour breaks, and 1 45-minute break, but they were not designed to have people sit at their computer and continue to chat. They were designed to give people the ability to get up, go to the toilet, get some fresh air, have a walk, grab some food, etc. And I think if we encouraged voice chat in that time, we are basically telling people they should probably stick around in that time, and that isn't. It's as much a time for them to recharge as it is for us as organizers.
If I can chip in, sorry, like I'm taking so much share, but I'm looking at the website, and people watching us on all the other channels also were looking at You Got This website, and there we go. Here from Belzamic, here from Cycle K, so here from Oath Zero. So you had all this. Sponsors having 5 minutes of glory, and these are like literal 5 minutes, as you see. And was it enough? So you didn't sell the talks to the sponsors, only the 5 minutes of glory.
Yeah, I very firmly believe, for my conference, and it isn't right for every conference, and I don't judge people who do this as long as they're kind of clear about the fact it's happening. I do not like selling talk slots. The way we structure it is, at this event, I think we had 10 talks. One of them was a sponsor. So actually, I'll come back to them in a minute because they're kind of a more isolated example. The way I generally do this is I have 2 people who I invite. They are the keynote speakers. And then everyone else is selected via blind review in a CFP. And going forward, I might actually even do away with the 2 invited speakers and go fully blind CFP the whole way. No, speakers can't buy those 25-minute plus 10-minute Q&A slots. What they do get, though, as you said correctly, are those 5 minutes to talk. And in the case of Circle CI, who was the headliner, they got 10 minutes, and it was live as opposed to pre-recorded, but played live like the others. And I tell sponsors, you can use that slot for anything you want. You can use that slot to basically do a product promotion, like an advert. You can use that slot to talk about how some of the themes of the conference maybe relate to your business. You could use it to just do a talk about core skills. As long as it abides by the code of conduct, like I trust you to do what's right. Here's a breakdown of the audience and generally what would resonate, so you're not completely off mark. And most sponsors take us up on that advice. But yeah, they just do this. They just do this 5-minute talk. And in that one isolated case, there was one sponsor who really wanted to talk about a core skill, and I looked at the schedule and I offered them a live slot because they were basically not going to talk about their company at all, and the talk topic was very on the nose for the conference. So I did give them a 10-minute live because we were able to put that in, but they didn't buy that.
Is it a 1-day conference, or it's a 1 day? Okay, and you have like 2 keynote speakers, and then the 5-minute talks.
1 day, 1 stream. in future, I might increase the number of streams, but I don't think it really makes sense for this conference. I like the fact that everyone who attends watches the same talks. They have the same talking points when they go to network. They have the same context, rather, the same shared experience of having watched this talk. The only way streams might make work, or multi-day might make work, is if maybe you go by like where career maturity, like where you're at in your career. But I still think it's important that everyone sees all of it. Your more experienced manager type, people manager type people get an insight into what their teams may be thinking or feeling, even if like they're not quite in tune with it. And individual contributors get an idea of what decisions and thoughts managers might need to make. As one of the themes of our conference is just managers. It's just like a talks for managers. There is obviously a conference called the Lead Dev, which focuses on this, though they also talk about technical topics. So it's just one of the things that is there for us, but it's not the one that has focus, if that makes sense, because they have that handled quite nicely. Sorry,
Actually,
yeah,
I was about to get like a couple of steps to what you mentioned previously about the smaller groups and networking. And I really admire your approach to having like a Discord server and like while running the conference. And I think that this is actually something that many of the conferences will be following. Even if they are not following this right now. But what you mentioned about smaller groups, you said that maybe it would make more sense to network in the smaller groups rather than having these huge events, because it looks like the conferences as they used to be, they're not coming back anytime soon. So yeah, pretty much this is something that I wanted to ask you to talk about a little bit more. Like, how do you think this all will be structured, and is that actually a future?
It's really hard to know. We spoke a bit about hybrid events, like in going live on every platform. So some people might have got parts of that conversation. I think that what organizers should be thinking about now is how you can bring together an online audience and an in-person audience and allow them to interact together, or at least give them a comparable experience. As a note, actually, I'm really sorry to derail. So there are might prove interesting for like conversation topics. On the money discussion, not something I've explored and not something I'm sure I will explore, but we have this talk library. It has 47 talks in it, 47 high quality talks with a reasonable amount of traffic to them. There's maybe something we could do around sponsorship there. I'm not going to run creepy ads. I'm not going to put them behind a login wall, but I wonder what we could do there. And then what I kind of went off pieced a bit with this, like I went off track to this. But in January, then we ran the second online conference. It was 2 days, I guess. There was a workshop day, which had limited tickets, and they were not free. They were affordable, but not free. And then we had the free conference day, the same as we did in June. For the conference day, for the workshop day, we used Zoom because Zoom had breakouts. And the reason I use Zoom, one, I think people are generally familiar with it, but I didn't know quite what the numbers were going to be. And if I knew what the numbers were going to be, which was slightly lower than what it could have been, it was still very positive. I probably would have used Discord voice channels, and then you give people roles to just let them see their breakout room, so to speak, and the facilitators can move between them. I would probably do that next time because it also pulls people into the Discord as well. The conference day, I built a platform which was basically a Frankenstein of a video player, and that was serviced by Mux, which is a video hosting and live streaming for developers. So we went StreamYard to Mux, and Mux embed or Mux video URL straight in the page. Captions, which was just a web, like an iframe of a page where the captioner was like getting the captions into. And then we had a now playing box, which I built an operator panel for, which I could update everyone's client for, and an announcement and sponsor set of boxes that people could see, and I could push data into at will as well. No community features. It was purely broadcast and like consume, because I didn't have time to build robust moderation and features. And I believe if you have community features, they have to come hand in hand with strong moderation features, or you are failing. you are putting people at risk. So we continued to use Discord. Plus, we had the audience and we knew how to use it and stuff like that.
And so this live.yougotthis.io that's the tech that you were talking about, right?
Yeah, yes. And again, it's a Frankenstein that was very much for me. And I still haven't got around to writing a decent README yet. While the site is now offline, it is on GitHub. YouGotThisConf, all one word, /live. Well, if you just go to YouGotThisConf on GitHub, you'll find it there. It was a bit of a Frankenstein, but worked really, really nicely all day. So on top of the sponsor 5-minute live, there was a way to watch it on demand. There were links to raffles for sponsors who opted in for that. And then people could come and have conversations in the Discord as well. But they weren't linked. They were kind of two experiences that were encouraging people who are on the platform to go over to Discord. But I think quite a lot of people didn't make it in there. They just didn't make it in there. They just consume the content. I'd be interested in seeing how we could
build the community on that.
Yeah, not just build a community, because not just build a community, but have a more coherent experience between these different platforms.
It's I mean, to me it's super interesting, all that focus on moderation. I mean, you explain why, and I totally agree, but I don't know. I somehow trust in human beings and in self-moderating, self-policing communities, as in, if the community, like if there is a community culture, a very strong community culture, it's very, very hard to break it, because it's the person who's violating, say, code of conduct. It's like a total white crowd. Like that person would just feel uncomfortable breaking the code of conduct because everybody around is so nice and polite.
Yes. So one argument is that, and I get it, and it does make sense. If are nice people and someone comes along and they are not a nice person, they will not be welcomed into that community. But they still have the ability to do the damage, even if it is isolated. And it also there's also a slight degree there of like what tolerance is as an individual for people being not nice. I feel like I have it pretty easy. I'm a white straight dude in tech. Like I'm fine. Like I can, occasionally someone's not nice, and I can, I'm in a position where I can handle that. Not everyone can. Also, people deal with a lot more relentlessly, and my ability is to stop them even having to see that, even having to experience that. And I think that's I do a lot to mitigate the fact that a scenario will exist, rather than just dealing with it. And Discord, we use what's it called? Is it called Dinobot? Is one of the like common moderation tools on Discord. Like very powerful, very quick, very good logging of actions that are taken by moderators. You can just shut people down. Slow mode channels, slow mode.
I know someone who would love this bot. I don't know if we're using that, but I would love it.
Yeah. So look, I mean, we've been enjoying this for 34 minutes and a few seconds, and we can like take the discussion in several directions. Talk more about money, talk more about the community, talk more about, well, I mean, the conference we have discussed and I liked a lot, but people, I mean, the comments are open. You can type and then we will maybe respond if you ask something clever. Otherwise, you can join us in the People's channel in a few minutes. That's People's channel. That's this. And we will have a casual discussion there with Kevin and probably with yourself if you care to join. So, Corina, where do we go from there?
Yeah, let's go for money. I mean, Lera's not here. Let's use our chance.
I mean, the money part. I like. Okay, let's get there. I very strongly think that money can be a good filter, as good as moderation. pretty much. So, for example, if there is a paid community and you sort of pay a monthly fee, I know it can be a small fee, whatever, $5, for €5 or 10. Normally, like, it's cheap enough to attend, and then it's sort of a safe zone. Once you're in, it's like, safe zone in the airport. Once you're in, you can like breathe normally.
And or if you're removed, you know that was a cost to you. Coming back in potentially could cost you again if you were trying to circumvent a block by creating new accounts. I don't like paid communities. For me, I am part of a couple of paid communities. I'm all for them, and like as a concept, it also allows you to pay for tooling and moderation and make sure the lights stay on. Personally, though, I do believe that you gave an example like $5, cheap enough, not to everyone, not to everyone. And so all I would say is if you consider paid communities, it has to come with a route to access that community if you cannot afford it. For the example of You Got This, we always run an inclusion program. And that's basically where all the surplus money goes. We have an inclusion program. For the physical events, there were two types of scholarship. There was one that just gave you a ticket, and then there was one that gave you a ticket. Once we mostly break even on sponsorship, right? So most of the time, just giving tickets away doesn't really have a huge cost to us other than food, I guess, and a physical seat that we can no longer sell, but that hasn't been an issue. And then we had a scholarship type that also did travel, accommodation, and stipend to make sure that you are basically cost neutral. You can pay for your travel once you're in the city, or you could buy dinner the night before or stuff like that. And we had a smaller number of those. For the online events, that was a number of free tickets to the workshop day.
And what were the sponsors most happy to cover? Channels, booths, five moments of glory, sponsorships, as in this what you just discussed. Like what?
So this is the moment where it's probably useful for me to wear my Vonage hat for a moment, because we obviously get the other side of the sponsorship conversations. Like I go to events as a sponsor. Online booths suck. They just suck. They're hard. They need to constantly have someone on them in order to engage with people, or have really, really clear expectations set that you're not always there. And I don't think most attendees understand that, because they're used to an in-person event where you're there. You're basically there's always someone stationed at your booth, your table, and your banners and stuff like that. So I don't think booths work particularly nicely from a sponsor standpoint, to be honest. One way around that is you just set basically office hours. I will be here between hours X and Y. Meet me during that time. But it's also a lot as a sponsor to just sit there idly waiting for conversations. Like I don't really enjoy them online. And maybe part of that's tooling, but I don't think it is. I think a lot of that is just when people aren't consuming content, they're not coming and chatting to sponsors. They're clicking a couple of links, saving them for later if they're interested, and then they're going and making lunch or having their lives or dealing with whatever fire they're having to deal with that day, because this isn't a normal work from home situation. Channels are better, I think. One of the issues, though, I find with Discord, Slack, and other tools is there is almost an expectation that there is a fairly fast turnaround for a response. It is an instant chat platform. That's how it looks. That's how this timeline of conversations look. One way we handled that was I'm not sure how well this was appreciated. We had one member of our team. We had sponsors provide up to 5 messages each. And throughout the day, we would post in those channels for them. Just a couple of links here and there. Tell them where to go, tell them what that sponsor's interested in, just to keep those channels alive a little bit, because a couple of them in June kind of stagnated where the sponsors weren't around for a lot of the event, or any of the event in some cases. In all honesty, I don't even think the sponsor channels work that well. I think just pulling everyone into general would have worked quite nicely. But that might be an audience size thing. Our live audience was 600 throughout the whole day, which, if you consider that, 1-2% of people are actually going to meaningfully engage.
Don't be humble. That's a lot. That's like an actual lot.
But what I mean is, if that's the audience watching, and let's say 10% of them make it into Discord, only 10% of those, 1% of your total audience are actually going to engage. So to split them between so many channels makes some of those channels look a bit sad. And we probably could have just done it all in general. One thing we've done at Vonage to handle booths out of interest is we have a passive challenge that we set. It's something that once we set in motion, we can just leave, we can walk away. We don't need to always be there. People can take part, they can read how to participate, they can do it and get all the way to the end without needing to chat to a person. That at least allows there to be some engagement with us and our product and getting to know it without it pinning on a person. Now, the nice thing about the 5 minutes is your whole audience basically see it. I mean, that's the reality. Your whole audience see it, which is really valuable. Basically, no one watched them on demand. I think every sponsor had fewer than 10 people watch each of the videos on demand. But then all of those videos were also played live. Or maybe that was an error in my platform in that they're a little harder to find, and maybe we could have surfaced those a bit more. But you can tell sponsors how many people watch their video. Like, they're the kind of metrics people do gather.
Indeed, metrics.
But
Did the sponsor structure you for metrics? Like, did the sponsor structure you for metrics? Like, hey, we sponsored you. Now tell us
Yeah,
what is
online
the
makes
revenue
it
on our
easier.
investment?
I was
Yeah.
I was about to ask as well.
Online totally makes it easier. And instead of sponsors coming to me and hassling metrics, I told sponsors upfront what I would be taking and what they would have access to. So, as a note, I don't give attendee lists to sponsors. There's no explicit opt-in. There could be an explicit opt-in, and then if I want to hear from company X, that's fine because I've opted in, but I'm literally not even interested in that. And that's clear from the outset. You're not going to get an attendee list, not even just an opt-in one that just doesn't exist. You'll get an attendee number. You will, at any point in time, I can tell you the attendee number, so I can say how many people session, or the peak attendance, or the attendance average at any point in time, unique viewers, stuff like that. And I think for most people, that's the interesting stuff. People's raffles, which they facilitated, I basically just provide a link to, is a way for them to gather their own list explicitly on a per sponsor basis if they want. But generally, they have to offer attendees something to encourage them to sign up for those. So we had a few do that, and they then are in control of those numbers. I don't need to report because that's their form or whatever it is to enter that. So I told sponsors explicitly what they were going to get. For the inclusion program, we don't even ask for any demographic information. I don't think it's important. I don't think it's important to be like, tell me your ethnicity, tell me where you're from, tell me your socioeconomic circumstance. This isn't a groveling story. I don't need you to tell me that. Just tell me what you want out of the day. Acknowledge that this is a program for basically not white men. And then if you've acknowledged that, if you've explicitly gone like, I acknowledge that's what this is for, then fair game. And we'll give them away to as many people as we can who will get the most value out of the event based on their answers. And because we don't collect that, we also can't really report that. Now, in person, I have a very simple way of understanding roughly how diverse your event is. You stand in the middle of the room, do a 360 spin, and observe the room. I can see this event doesn't look like a lot of tech conferences. Like, this is a very lovely, diverse crowd. That's great. Some came in through an inclusion program, some bought tickets or were sponsored by work. Doesn't matter. I can see that. Online, that's a bit harder. Online, I might be tempted, if I really wanted that data, to collect it. It's just impossible to tell. But even then, it's not going to change what I deliver. So it's not really that important, if that makes sense. So we're known as an event series that attracts a diverse crowd because we also make efforts to reach out to communities that are not full of white men. So, yeah, I imagine that translates online too.
But for this is the question I have in mind for a while. But for sponsors and like companies in general, do you think it makes like right now they actually want to attend more online events than they used to? I mean, just physical events, or do they pretty much stick to their previous schedule and go to the conferences they used to go and not really do anything more online than they used to?
All I can use is my own experience here. And this isn't even like a canonical, this isn't really like Vonage official thing at all. Like, we see events that happen and reach out to them. We have events come and solicit us, whether they're online or in person, doesn't matter. If they are the right events for us, and that could be a mix of audience size, audience, like something specific about the audience, whether it's a region, a language or technology community that we're focusing on, or something to do with a specific technology, or a community that looks at bolstering, diverse representation in tech or some other social cause environment comes to mind. It doesn't matter whether they're online or in person. That isn't the thing that has changed our focus. I think how we approach those events might be different just by virtue of like where we find value in events is slightly different. But yeah, no, at least in our case, it's not that we're only doing the previous events, but the online editions. There are more. The other nice thing about online events is the overhead for a sponsor to take part is way lower. Most event organizers thinks, I charge them $1,000, for example. Great, it costs them $1,000. No, it costs them $1,000 plus 2 people's time for the length of the conference, plus their travel, accommodation, lodging, plus shipping in and out, all of the giveaway items. There's a huge, there are lots of costs that a lot of organizers don't really fully appreciate on top of just the money. Online events strip a bunch of that away, which means your opportunity cost to take part in them also shrinks. So you could, in theory, do more with the same team or be more smart about how you're spending the same amount of resource. Or spend less resource.
Stay with Kevin for another hour, but maybe we can do this in a less live, less online environment, so you all can join us in the People's channel here in Discord, right here. People channel, it's voice. Please join us. And for now, goodbye. It was Kevin Lewis, YouGotThisConf, Karina, and myself from the Real Events running this podcast that recently got a cool name, Post Facebook Communities. Do you like this name, by the way? Anyways, join us in people. Goodbye.
Bye.
See ya.